Jah guide us, Jah protect us in this land so free. From mountains high to ocean deep, we stand in unity. The mountains sing with the morning sun. The rivers flow, their work never done. But now they bring machines with fire untamed to scorch our land and leave it chained. Oh, nuclear Jamaica, not in our name. We won't let them turn paradise to shame. Protect the land, the waters, the sky.
Hello, here we go. It's called Nuclear Jamaica. There's a link in the description to that particular song. There's a lot of those songs on this site. Bit of a late show tonight, my apologies. That's the way it rolls. Nothing I can do about it. Surprised it makes it here any night. So why boil water to make power? Well, that's how you do it, Danny. You spin a turbine, you boil the water. But you're not listening to me. Why boil water? Because that's how it works, Danny. You got to boil water to make the turbine spin, stupid. Yeah, but why boil it, though? And the answer is because geothermal is already boiling. So why are we using gas, oil, coal, nuclear to boil water when geothermal is right under your feet no matter where you do on the planet, boiling away? And say you can't drill down the last couple of miles, but you're going to get 400 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That's pretty darn good. Well, just use a little bit of gas or oil or coal to bump it up to 700 degrees, and there's nothing you can't do better that nuclear, gas, oil, and coal can do. And you're not using 20% of the resources to bump up the temperature of the geothermal because you're not willing to take a fraction of the money you spend on fusion and nuclear and work out the kinks, because that's all it would take is just a fraction of the money you waste on small modular reactors, micro reactors, fusion fantasies. If you took 1/5000th of the academics working on fusion that we'll never see, and said, make us a drill bit that work goes a bit deeper. Hell, get rid of those guys. Just get an engineer to do it, and spend the money, mass produce. You can walk in a Canadian Tire and buy it. And every community can get busy and produce their own power with geothermal. You can bump it up with a little bit of gas, a little bit of oil to higher temperatures to really drive a big turbine, if you got 1 million people or something. But most likely you can drill down deep enough if you took a fraction of the money you're going to spend to build it, come up with technology. I mean, one of the technologies you're talking about is using pneumatic cutters, and what they're talking about is 25,000 pounds per square inch water pressure. They'll slice the rocks, and then they have a pneumatic hammer that will just pulverize the rocks, and then the water will get sucked up with the debris through a vacuum line. And your drill bit just widens the hole out, right? But that's fine, that kind of technology. But we live in an age where we can actually melt the rocks. That's another possibility, right? We're not exactly cavemen anymore. But why are you boiling water when the water's already boiling underneath your feet a few miles? No, we got to build something where you need 1 million corporations, 1 million businesses have to make the parts for a nuclear power plant. Imagine if you had 1 million businesses to make the parts for geothermal. You feel me? And geothermal doesn't contaminate the entire ocean in just 20 days. Think about that technology. That's pretty cool technology. I want some of that. Get me some of that. That's great stuff. It's called geothermal. And you haven't got to be some weirdo from the nuclear industry to figure out how to make it work. And we're always left with the same question. Is nuclear power the evilest industry in history? The fuel pools are just splitting atoms directly into the environment all day. Nobody, because you say the word fuel pool and people can't comprehend it. If you said they were lighting fuel rods and burning them at night, and they're releasing those isotopes into the environment, you might get it. Most of you still won't get it. If you're putting cyanide in pop cans or something, I don't know. Like it's hard to compare it. It's equal to putting cyanide in everybody's pop bottles, right? Because it poisons everything. The radioactive fallout. So a single gram, and it is. The actual physical atoms are broken up into what they call curies, and a curie is 36 billion physical atoms. Each one is capable of causing you incredible harm over long term. A single one in your body is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Your body tries to repair the damage every second. The chromosomes, DNA, and cells it can't keep up with that. With white blood cells, and it tries to attack the source and stop it, and can't do that. So for the rest of your life, your body, animal, mammal, humans, whatever, your body's attacking the source and the damage that's created every second from the explosions almost at the speed of light, called the Beck wall. Because the Beck wall is it should be called an explosion. It shouldn't be called a Beck wall. Like a BQ explosion maybe, or something like that. Because it's an explosion in every direction, almost at the speed of light. So, like, if I take a conventional explosive and I explode it, right? Those parts are not traveling anywhere near the speed of light. But this little single atom, you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, and you can't see it, and each one is pulsing energy at the speed of light, and that's why you're able to boil water for 1 million homes and businesses in a reactor. But there's a sinister side to that because it's producing all these isotopes. Like the amount of isotopes that it has to produce to boil water every minute, is more atoms than all the stars in the universe and all the grains of sands on the beaches combined, right? Every second it has to produce that much. And so when you take it out of the reactor core after a year and put it in the fuel pool, it's still splitting atoms for 1 million homes and business, but there's no containment. This is why almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And that's why because that's pretty insidious. Imagine if you were making cyanide and the only places you had your factories were right in the middle of prime farmland. And you were a farmer and you're like, they're making poison right there. You'd be pretty upset, right? At least I hope you would be. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, it's hard to believe that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. But people still deny it. No, because they can't fathom the concept for some reason. I don't know. It's very worrisome that this industry. It's very worrisome that the industry has decided this is their best option is to poison everybody. And that all you got to do is tell everybody it's like a banana and a potato chip and walk in the sunshine. Over and over and over for a little over 80 years now. And ever since everything radioactive they've ever created, like they started off with radium and they figured that was a cure for cancer, that was a cure for smoking, that was a cure for hair loss, it was a cure. They were making radium toothpaste, radium makeup, radium lipstick, radium soap, radium radium spray. So you go around spraying it on your furniture and give it a nice shine and everything and a fresh smell or whatever. Like, it was real carpetbag selling techniques. And so I'd be very hesitant to buy anything antique from that era, right? Because, and, they were using for radium suppositories. They had radium foot warmers. Try to wrap your mind around that statement. Radium foot warmers where they had concentrated radium in a container, and it was so much it would heat up the container and irradiate everybody that had their feet there. Like, it just, let me cover the first one. It's just absurd. The entire legacy of the nuclear industry is so absurd. It's, and every single, like, uranium, plutonium, radiation, everything has been tried to kill a tumor. It's never killed. None of them has ever killed a tumor. That hasn't stopped them. Every time they discover it could be used to cure cancer. I think they kind of don't like saying that word so much as to treat cancer, for cancer therapy, radiation therapy. Where only 2 or 3% survive. Now, you can't get them all, the nuclear industry will tell you. So true. So true. That's so evil. Why are you so evil all the time? You so evil. Why you gotta be so hot? I'll get along with it. 709-589-4406, 4406. Yippee-ki-yay, little doggy. There's a method to the madness, bear with me. All the food was banned in half of Japan by 55 countries because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and climbing out and flying on an airplane. Or 15 minutes in a kayak. That's a friggin' maniac right there. Robert Gale, he does transplants. He radiates people till all their cells are dead. And he tries to stick a leg or a pig heart into them. None of them live, but he's in his 70s now. He'll get it eventually. He's been doing it a long time. He's as cold-blooded as they come, man. He's literally like a lizard. He wakes up in the morning, he has a big sun lamp. He has to sit there so he can digest his breakfast, his flies and whatever. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Well, that's easy, Dana. Because nuclear power is the evilest industry in history, damn it. Oh, well, that makes sense. Thank you. May I have another? Why is every nuclear power plant that I can find surrounded by farms? Coincidence? There's so many evil things because all the farms are sucking up the radiation, right? They like having the farms right up to the property. That's their favorite ones. Majority of the pictures. And if you look at it from a satellite, it's even scarier. How many farms are within 100 square miles? Good old nuclear. They had it all figured out a long time ago. And it doesn't take much to make you sick, is the problem. But it happens in increments over a few decades. And you compromise your immune system. This is Sellafield in the United Kingdom. This is the Mississippi River. This is your typical nuclear power plant in France, Germany, Sweden, for instance, United States. Canada got most of theirs right on the Great Lakes. And the CANDU reactors in Canada are extra evil. Each reactor produces more tritium than every other nuclear plant on the planet combined. That's a CANDU reactor. CANDU. They were designed to make tritium for nuclear weapons. Tritium-3H, I should add. And Canada, the one we got on the East Coast, legally, Britain's reactors might release 18 trillion tritium atoms legally a year. 18 trillion. It's a lot. Canada's reactors are 60,400,000 trillion atoms legally every year from each reactor. The story's insane. And they harvest a lot of tritium. That's used to make tritium-3H, used to make the exit lights. And they've had some major accidents at those places too, because it's a nuclear accident. All you can do is run away. And so, it gets out into the environment at some point. Why do they do that? So the food sucks up the radiation. It moves that. It doesn't bioaccumulate in the area. It does, because there's lots of studies, particularly on this place here, far away from the coastlines, incredible radiation everywhere. It's absurd. And that picture doesn't do it justice. Neither does it. This is typical nuclear power plants. Because that's the best way to poison everybody, I guess. Or it's just a coincidence. Gas, oil, and coal don't build their facilities there. They're reserved for nuclear power plants. Why go geo? Why have small modular reactors? Try to have. They got 100 companies, still haven't got one. The Canadian version is 240 feet tall. That's 50 feet taller than Fukushima's massive reactors. They're going to have half of it underground, so still 12 stories above the ground. You know Fukushima, right? 30 million one-ton bags. Radioactive fallout at Fukushima. And of course, Fukushima is the biggest farming prefecture on the planet. And they had the biggest reactors, some of the biggest reactor sites on the planet capacity. And these reactors were big. Each reactor core was equal to about 100 Chernobyls. So the fuel pools are gone, and they're producing a billion pounds a year just of rice in Fukushima prefecture. It's just, all the dumping is done in the ocean over the years. I mean, insidious, sadistic. And as there was a treaty coming into effect to stop the dumping into the ocean, same as nuclear testing treaties, to stop doing it, nuclear ban treaties, leading up to each of the dumping in the ocean and nuclear ban treaties, they increased their uses of weapons and dumping. It's just unbelievable, eh? Just unbelievable contempt. So you got 30 million one-ton bags at 3% of the farmland in the communities is all they were picking it up in. And they're growing food right alongside the one-ton bags. And then sending it, they're so far out of control, nothing makes any sense. It doesn't make sense. So it was now they want to, they spent $48 billion picking up one-ton bags, 30 million of them, which is just 5 rows of traffic around the planet if it was a bag of one-ton trucks, because it's 2,200 pounds, right, each bag. And then, of course, we know that the food sucks up the radiation because there's a zillion, quadrillion studies out there saying, don't grow food alongside a nuclear reactor, stupid. Okay, well, let's set the reactor up in that prime farmland, I guess, because the food sucks up the radioactive fallout. It makes us look good. We need farm. Farm makes nuclear look good. They're maniacs. The industry is literally, and because such a small amount will cause irreversible harm to the vulnerable of society, particularly, imagine the birds and the animals, how much more vulnerable they are than children. And the numbers we're talking about it's impossible not to get at least that much in every kilogram of food they're eating right now. And I think that bumps up the street creds of the nuclear industry as the evilest industry in history. I'm just saying. It's going to be hard to beat them. And when you're growing food in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wastelands, what does that tell us? What kind of maniac does shit like that? Nuclear. Organization joins forces to advance nuclear shipping. Safety 4C. And I didn't go down the rabbit hole on the last story of Safety 4C. They rarely show up in my feed. Now that they're here, Safety 4C, and they're promoting nuclear shipping. I was like, oh crap, what have we got here? The editorial team in green shipping. That's not subtle brainwashing at all. That's social engineering and overdrive, this site. And so I decided to have a look at what they were throwing out there. And you can look at all of these stories, every one of them about nuclear ships, nuclear shipping. How do we get there? Who wants to buy into it? Here's how we're going to do it. Holy shit, I couldn't believe it. They had 89 pages of nuclear shipping stories, 89 pages. So, of course, you got a pretty big organization all of a sudden. This is not some kooky pro-nuclear nut job. This is a huge operation that are determined now to destroy the ocean forever. Well, they haven't got far to go. All the whales are emaciated, I suppose. Have signed a memorandum of understandings to jointly shape the future of nuclear power shipping and transportable. They don't have a reactor. They don't have, like, there's not illegal to poison you with radiation, and that causes us all kinds of grief for 80 years now. That little tiny law that makes it illegal to poison you for 3,000 chemicals doesn't apply to thousands of anthropogenic man-made radioactive isotopes that no species has an autoimmune trigger against, legally can kill everything on the planet, and you can't be held liable because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and Parliament doesn't have the authority. Only the so-called nuclear regulatory, 5 people that are picked by your prime ministers and presidents, and they're not going to make it illegal. And if they do, then they're going to get fired, and then whoever replaces them is going to redact it. And so this is the ultimate in evil. Why does it have to be, like, they want nuclear for everything? They envision, and they've always tried, right? Right now they're trying to sterilize every bit of your food. So all the good bacteria and stuff in your food is really good for you. They want to kill that because that could have a parasite in there somewhere. It's like irradiating your whole community because there could be a cockroach there somewhere. That's how this industry sees us not as cockroaches, but as beings. We're not even a species. We're just a so-called being, like literally just considered as beings. Explained by the Nuclear Industry Association, they're connected to the nuclear industry. This partnership comes at a pivotal moment as the International Atomic Energy Agencies look to launch the Atlas program later this year to assist countries in developing regulations and guidance for the transport of small modular reactors, regulations and guidance for the transport. And the United Nations, of course, is UN. This International Atomic Energy Agency has a bunch of the pro-nuclear so-called watchdogs, and that also promote nuclear. And then they don't do any watchdogging, all they do is promote nuclear. And if there's a nuclear accident, then their job is to cover it up. And they're sanctioned by 195 countries, basically. And for developing transport of small modular reactors for the use of nuclear energy at sea. And so they determined to have a whole bunch of Chernobyls that they're ramming into each other at some point in the future. I mean, like you've seen the headlines over the years where he wanted to put a small modular reactor, micro reactor, right across Canada. 5,000 of them. And Canada is about 55,000 miles or 5,500 miles across. So you're looking at one every mile, a micro reactor across the country. How, like, and it was crazy because it got all this attention, right? And all this hype behind it, and people start getting enthusiastic about it and buying into the propaganda. But if you look at the logistics of it and the realistic outcome of how many of them are going to melt down or explode or anything else, like right now, if you have a big enough solar flare, every nuclear reactor and fuel pool on the planet will melt down in the morning at the same time, worldwide, and nothing we can do about it either. Once it starts heating up, all you can do is run away. You can't go in there because your organs melt. And despite all the nonsense you hear from the industry about robots are like, what is a robot going to do at a nuclear meltdown? I've never figured that one out. Send in the robots and then everybody goes back to sleep. It's like some kind of magic spell, right? All the helicopter pilots over Chernobyl died, and Chernobyl is like a paper towel compared to these reactors and the inventories that were at the top of the buildings. In Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. But now all these years later, because you start realizing how bad Chernobyl really was, because you're able to we have the luxury of hindsight in comparison, right? Like, the whole story's crazy, isn't it? Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency, by the way, is not a regulatory agency. And therefore, they're not in a position to judge or approve anything nuclear. But because they own the media, like Japan is their biggest donor out of 195 countries, so they're very wealthy, very influential, and they get prominence wherever they go, despite the fact that they're not a regulatory agency and not in a position to judge or approve any nuclear facet. They don't have any sovereignty over any country on the planet. And they're the threat to the species. Okay, back. And they're going around for 80 years telling people you get more radiation flying on an airplane, eating potato chips, holding a banana with a granite rock than you would at a nuclear meltdown. They got some coolness on them, I tell you that much anyway. They got the world. They're convinced the world is just too stupid to work it out. Unfortunately, they're right. I shouldn't say stupid, just complacent maybe. Be nice about it. Neptunium-239 dispersal. So Chernobyl would have done the same thing. 3 Mile Island would have done the same thing. The radioactive fallout model is based on 20 days. Neptunium, by the way, 239 decays to plutonium 239 in 2.5 days. And plutonium gives you 3 different cancers: the skeleton, the liver, and the lung. And the skeleton, out of 100 people, say for instance, about 60 people will die from skeleton tumors or something like that. And some will die of 3 tumors, right, because you have plutonium in you. And this model at 20 days shows the whole plant, but the model is only based on venting, which is a irrelevant amount. It's the only element on the planet that can make a plume that covers the planet, that pulses energy on top of that at the speed of light every second and never goes away. In this case here, Neptunium, it can't just be Neptunium and it can't just be plutonium, right? It has to be all the other isotopes. So that plume is poisoning Earth and heating the planet up literally for millions of years. It's pulsing energy. Every isotope, think of an invisible snowstorm from the ocean floor to the troposphere. I'm not saying that it might be like that. I'm saying it's like that. That's what's going on for 80 years almost. Because the way it spreads out, because of how much, because every gram, like a gram of cesium is, I think it's around 90 curies, and each curie is 37 billion atoms, very dangerous atoms. And so you got to multiply 37 billion by 90. You're up around 4 trillion atoms. And when you're getting into these numbers, that's only a gram. Japan lost millions and millions of pounds. And so all the studies, even though it was a small amount that they acknowledged, right, the plume models all look the same no matter which country or institution, will typically show you a symmetrical covering of the planet from 20 to 31 days. And that's it's like a continuous snowstorm covering the whole planet at 20 days. It never stops snowing and the snow never melts. In this case, it never stops pulsing energy and it never goes away. But you can't see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up. Or back to that ship company. Small modular reactors are being seen as potential breakthrough potential, with industry reports highlighting their compact. So how come for hundreds of years they can sail the ocean with big sails, big ships, but now they can't do it? No, it got to be an engine. And we have technology now where the sails are managed by computers. Even if you put the big kites up there, and I know there was designs out there for an underwater submarine train that would be like a big cargo train 1 mile long or something. And instead of having a container ship at the surface, you would have these underwater cargo ships. So there's less resistance, right? Everything's automatic. It just shoots right across the ocean, comes into the port, and then the captain or a pilot gets aboard to bring it into port. Inherently safe design. Well, you haven't got one. There is no small modular reactors. You don't have them for ships per se. They're not suitable. Could make them suitable for use at sea. But there's nothing. If something happens to the ship and the ship sinks, you can't recover it, and so therefore it shouldn't be used. And because, like the so-called Russian small modular reactor on the academic barge, and we covered that whole barge right from the time that they started experimenting with it. It was supposed to be an experimental small modular reactor, and then they were using spare parts from all kinds of other projects. It was a derelict barge that they fixed up. It's like a 15-story building above water. And so that's not a small modular reactor. That don't meet the hype train that they had for years and years of a small modular reactor. But a lot of the so-called icebreakers got small modular reactors were dumped at sea. The Soviet Union, they had 160 nuclear submarines from the Cold War, from the World War II and that, abandoned up in Manix or something, I can't pronounce it properly, where they were just ran up on beaches. You can't decommission them. And apparently they just said to hell with it a few years back and started just tearing them apart and lugging the stuff up to Mayak. And the amount of, because everything is so contaminated in that area, they just said to hell with it. Well, everything's contaminated anyway, which is true. But I mean, these submarines they got a submarine up in the Arctic where the Norwegians, I believe it was, and I'm going to dig up the study right now, the Norwegians and the Russians had done a study on a sunken submarine, Kamsalata or something like that, with two nuclear reactors on it. And he said that the integrity of the hull wouldn't be compromised for over 1,000 years. Now, I was a commercial diver. I've seen lots of shipwrecks after a couple of years. And you'll be shocked at how quick these things rust out, including those 45-gallon barrel drums that the British were dropping on the continental shelf for 30-plus years. They rust anyway, but like in the case of the drums, they're crimped at the top and bottom. So when they get down a couple of atmospheres, they pop open. And they knew it. Again, makes them the evilest industry in history. Providing regulatory challenges are overcome. Oh yeah, back to the academic, the barge with Russia's small modular reactor they're always putting on a pedestal. They changed the fuel in it. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I started reading the story. They said they use fuel in a storage room. But that's not what you do. You store it in a fuel pool because it's boiling water for decades to come. Every day it's boiling off a huge amount of water. And those waters loaded with isotopes. It's still splitting atoms, see? And every fuel pool worldwide is doing that. It's monstrous. It is your true crimes against humanity, assault, injury. It's an insult to humanity, the emissions from that. Each fuel pool, there's over 1,000 of them worldwide. The amount of radiation is equal to a massive plume every 30 days from each fuel pool. And there's more coming out of the fuel pools that were put into these models that covers the planet in 20 days. Much more. There's 120,000 liters. These emissions are only based on venting, so they're probably based on 100 or 200 liters. Because of the way isotopes work, and there's so much of it. Like Canada was 220 million atoms alone per liter of radioactive fallout of iodine-129. With a 15 million year half-life. My goodness. So now that means you're going to poison every insect, every animal, every bird, every human. And you can't just have one isotope. It's the nightmarish. And then the industry, if it had any checks and balances, it couldn't exist. If there was any rules to regulate it, if you made it illegal to poison you with man-made radiation, every nuclear plant and hospital floor with the radiation will have to shut down immediately. Like the hospital rooms for radiation therapy, the hospital room for the patients getting radiation therapy are called $1 million rooms. They're lead-lined rooms to protect the people in the hallway from getting radiation doses from your loved ones in the bed. So what do you really think this is doing to your loved one? And after 80 years, they still haven't cured cancer with every isotope imaginable. Do you really think that's acceptable? Like, do you get what they're doing to you? If that's not the definition of the evilest industry in human history, what actually is? Furthermore, on the regulatory front, MSC 110 agreed to commence the revision of outdated regulations for nuclear-powered ships. So they want to get rid of checks and balances for the ships, because that's holding them up from being evil. Or we thought they couldn't get any eviler. By engaging the global institutions such as the Degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency, UN, the IMO, WNTI, and NEMO, will help shape the standards. And they all work to enhance each other synergistically. None of them had any authority over anybody on the planet or any country. And yet their so-called recommendations becomes the framework for the genocide of the ocean again. They're very strange people. And because they can make money. They're part of the in crowd. They're better than everybody. They don't care about the species. They don't care about the air. They don't care about the ocean. They care about nothing. We're proud to partner with NEMO to drive the development of international standards for transportable nuclear power plants and wider applications of nuclear power in the maritime. And they're working very hard. They're hard workers, these people. Said Professor Peter Bryant, Chief Executive Officer. Professor Peter Bryant. Do you want me to show you a list of professors that went to jail for just the most hideous crimes against the most vulnerable of society? We already done that there last week, didn't we? Not doing it again tonight. Nuclear Energy Maritime Organizations. NEMO. So they give themselves these acronyms, and now they're the gods forever. They're the authorities that the media will refer to, and nobody else is allowed to have a dissenting voice. And their narrative is always to promote the most evilest technology. What is Safety for Sea? It's a dedicated maritime platform offering noise-free news, insights, accident reports, analysts, experts. So they admit that they have accidents, do they? Tailored for ship operators, shore-based teams, and industry enthusiasms. And as you start to look at this organization, you start realizing they're unbelievably organized. They're motivated. They're highly funded. They attract 300,000 monthly visitors. Most of those are in key positions. Published more than 70. They're like the World Economic Forum for the ocean, basically. Publishes more than 70 magazine issues since 2020. And as I was just trying to take a peek at them, because that's all you can really do, there's no listing to who owns the company. Right, there's no listings for who owns it. They don't publicly list individual ownership details, but the company is privately held, actively involved in promoting nuclear. Could this be a Rod Adam scenario, I wonder? Rod's pretty stupid. I'm pretty sure that he would do something like this. And I mean, when I say stupid when it comes to nuclear, I mean sadistic. They're very organized. So I guess the 16th Safety for Sea Forum, wherever they're going to have it this year, 2025. And they go to different countries, so they have 600 delegates, 300 organizations attend, from safety, technical, marine departments of shipping operators. This was a non-profit event that attracted a targeted group of 600 delegates and 300 organizations. So these are shakers and movers when it comes to nuclear at sea. This is one of the heads of the dragons, as far as I can tell. Attendance was free of charge to the delegates, a common feature of all Safety for Seas forums, with sponsors covering all the expenses of the event. So they're covering expenses for 900 people. Of course, to the nuclear industry, that does mean nothing. There's nothing. But it doesn't sound like a typical let me bring up the calculator. Sometimes that makes more sense for me. So 900 plus people, because a company might have 2 or 3 representatives there, right? So we'll lowball it. Times what? Over a few days, say $750 on each person they're going to spend. Champagne and cocktails. Not much money for the nuclear industry, $675,000. That's a joke for the nuclear industry. they waste that much on donuts, I'm pretty sure. Just in Canada every day. At the Bruce Power. Anyway, we see ya. So we won't forget that company. Keep an eye on that company, that organization. Safety 4C, and they got Safety 4C Plus. They're thinkers, eh? New AI nuclear partnership aims to streamline plants licensing. See a lot of those stories showing up now. Atomic Canyon, AI startup, no less. Atomic Canyon. Why did they call it Atomic Canyon for, I wonder? We'll see. I can't figure it out. Department of Energy Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is built on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. And they've had something like 38 reactors, 48, I can't remember how for Oak Ridge. They're one of the biggest national laboratories. So they go through a lot of reactor designs. They had a lot of meltdowns on top of the biggest aquifer in that part of the country, where I know they spent at least $90 million trying to mitigate it. And that aquifer feeds around 24,000 farms. And it's been contaminated since the 50s, since the Manhattan Project. That's how they got away with it. We'll announce a collaboration Tuesday to streamline licensing for new nuclear plants. We'll announce a collaboration Tuesday to streamline licensing. So it's a new AI startup, and they're going to feed this thing something like 50 million pieces of paper from regulatory agencies. It'll expand Atomic Canyon's business, I dare say, which is focused on helping owners of existing reactors use AI and regulatory compliance, because normally they need like 2 million pieces of paper for the application. Then they would hire 400 people, 500 people for the regulatory agency, and they would go through, they would break up 2 million pieces of paper into different facets of the nuclear project. And then these people would go through this looking for issues in the application for the designs and everything else. And so they would have to eventually coordinate it all down to a yes or a no, whether that design is safe or needed modifications, resubmit it back to the company to redesign, and they would help them, right? They're very helpful. They're there to promote nuclear, 100%. So Atomic Canyon, who knows? I didn't look up who owns Atomic Canyon, because I know that's not the last time we're going to run into Atomic Canyon. AI model that based on over 50 million pages of highly technical, non-nuclear regulatory commission's documents. We call them non-regulatory commission because that's what they actually do. They're called a nuclear regulatory commission, but they're the non-nuclear regulatory commission as far as we can tell. So Oak Ridge, we covered that a few years back, where they were building one of the biggest computer system on the planet or something. And so they're going to use that 50 million pieces of paper on the hard drives and set AI out there to answer questions and make list of priorities. And we're trying to get nuclear reactors onto the grid so that we can increase the energy supply and hopefully ultimately decrease the price to consumers. How are you going to decrease the price to consumers with nuclear? Which is the dirtiest technology on the planet. But how are you going to decrease the price of something that goes, like the new reactor going to build in Britain is going to be 70 billion Canadian. It's just absurd. And you know it's never going to come in on price, so you're looking at $110 billion if they go ahead and build it. So we can why not use geothermal and compressed air storage and sand? You can heat sand to 700 degrees. You can get all the lava rocks you want from Iceland and Greenland for next to nothing, and that'll hold 3,500 degrees temperatures, for instance. You can store energy and heat for long periods with that kind of stuff, for months. And then you can unpack the heat into energy. We have that technology. We live in that time. There's all kinds of other ways to store energy too. It's just bizarre that they put all this energy into nuclear. Like, they're throwing everything at nuclear in every direction you look at. And nothing else is allowed to exist. They have to dominate, because of AI will come up with all kinds of solutions. So they need to dominate before AI becomes a mainstream, and then we can turn back the clock, right? In other words, if they're going to build a bunch of reactors, and all of a sudden we got this AI showing that this is a better solution. Like, if you take geothermal, yeah, it's easy to get 400-degree temperatures, so why not heat it up another 200 degrees? Why do you have to keep drilling until you hit 600 or 700 degrees? Why can't you just use 20% of the electricity to heat that up to spin the massive turbines? You can run on its own power now. So, like, the best way, as far as I can tell, to do it is every gas plant, every oil plant, every coal plant, go there and build your geothermal, right? And then get ready to pump it into the grid and run it and boil the same water that you're using gas, oil, and coal to boil, and just use a bit of gas, oil, and coal to pump the temperature up the extra degrees that you need from the typical geothermal deep well that you can drill right now with the technology that you got. So 20%, if the gas, oil, and coal plants are only burning 20% a day, right? So every 5 days or every 4 days, is the same as 1 day, so to speak, right? Depending on how you do this. So say every 4 days, you're stretching out the amount of gas, oil, and coal you burn now to 4 days instead of 1 day to produce the same energy. And with a simple modification at each site. That's a simple modification. That's not a threat to any of the businesses there. That's a plus. You're burning less consumables. I had to go ahead and start rubbing my eye. Don't blink. And so why does nuclear, small modular reactors, micro reactors have to be the only thing that can run artificial intelligence? How come we can't run it on gas, oil, or coal? How come we can't run it on geothermal? Well, we can. We know that because Facebook and Google have built geothermal for data plants, right? But the nuclear is screeching the loudest, so they get, why do they have to be everywhere? What's the point of this? It's completely, there is no nuclear renaissance even now. You got the same gigawatts now as you had in the early 90s. There's 660 gigawatts of solar power came online last year. 660. It was like 5 gigawatts of nuclear came online, but there was 4 went offline permanently. And so is there a nuclear renaissance or a solar renaissance? There is no nuclear renaissance. But there's all these hype trains that don't exist, and they have to develop technology, and you got like 100 companies trying to create fusion. You got 100 companies trying to create small modular reactors. You got hundreds of other companies out there working in the background and ready to be declared a startup. And geothermal's sitting there waiting. At some point, you're going to turn to geothermal, and you're going to say, wow, we should have got here earlier. I got to go. So, it's a desperation what we're seeing in the industry. Nuclear industry is desperate, calling itself a nuclear renaissance. Well, clearly there's no nuclear renaissance. You know, the last nuclear plant they built in Canada, Light and Power, went bankrupt in Ontario. Then they got when 3 Mile Island happened, there was serious radioactive fallout. They covered it up successfully, but there was a concession made. They had to put sirens around all the nuclear power plants in the United States. And there was 100 nuclear plants that just gave up. They were, had their applications. They were going to build 100 new nuclear power plants. They already had their applications into the regulatory agencies. They all gave up. And so then the only one that got really built from that era onwards was Watts-Bar Reactor number 2, which took 44 years to get up and running. It was a half-built reactor, and after Fukushima, they started spending money on it because they needed it for tritium-3H for weapons. That was the only reason they continued to build and finish Watts-Bar. But they can always count on the Canadian CANDU reactors for their tritium-3H. So can France, and obviously, and Great Britain. And meanwhile, we'll poison the entire planet, and everybody in the nuclear industry ends up happy, and everybody else and all the species get sick and die. In the United States, where part of the demand itself is driven by AI, but why is AI always small modular reactors and microreactors? Why is AI, the only thing that AI can work on is nuclear? When all the AI on the planet right now are working on anything, gas, oil, and coal, and nuclear. How come all the future has to be by... It's a really interesting dilemma, because like AI makes them look smart. Is that what they're hoping for at some point? Because they never look smart in their entire existence in the industry. So they're hoping AI will make them the fantasy cartoon character that they admired when they were young and grew up to find out that didn't exist. And that's really exciting. You can use geothermal anywhere on the planet to turn a turbine. And then if you spend 1/10 or 1/5 of the gas, oil, or coal to get it to burn a little hotter every day, that's acceptable, isn't it? If you came up with an invention for energy and all you had to do was spend 20% of the gas to make the same amount of energy as you did for 100,000 people, that'd be pretty cool, right? That's geothermal. Geothermal can work that way. You can build it. You don't have to change anything. Leave everything where it's to. Build your geothermal, tap into it, and reduce your consumables by just depending upon the geothermal and supplementing the temperature of the geothermal's final product to turn the turbine, per se, right? As you develop more technology, you can phase out the consumables. Doesn't that make more sense than trying to develop a fantasy fusion? Is the strangest stories whenever you read them, and the same with small modular reactors. Why do you got to boil water when you already got water boiling underneath your feet called geothermal? What do you need to boil it somewhere else when you already got it right there? It's not like you're going to move your nuclear power plant all over the country. It's got to be mobile. And you don't have to worry about finding farmland to build your nuclear power plants. Right? Does that make sense? France's EDF to withdraw from some overseas projects, cut job sources. Says last year France went through 4 prime ministers. It's one of the very few countries that has a president and a prime minister. The president is typically a dictator that you can never get rid of, like Macron. And allegedly married to his dad, who had had some serious surgery to look like his wife. Cut jobs, sources say. Has a focus on a major construction program at home. So it wants to build more reactors. It's not going to use the design that is using in Great Britain and China, for instance, and Denmark or Norway, where we built that other stupid 15-year reactor, like 4 times over budget, and almost a decade beyond schedule. They're not going to use that design in France for their own reactors. They're just going to use that for other people. Hard cases. And so now they're going to pull out people. They're going to come back on their expansions worldwide and just try to build their own reactors in their own countries. Where are they going to get the welders? They can't just pull all those welders off the jobs they're already committed to. Fontana was appointed, so they have the EDF has a new nut job running the site, and he's frustrated with EDF's slow progress in revamping the French nuclear fleet. Well, the nuclear fleet in France was all built at the same time. And one of their advantages was they were getting dirt cheap uranium from Niger, where they caused a civil war for 60 years. And they gave weapons to the tribes that hated the government and got rid of the government and caused a civil war still going on there today. Incredible poverty. But they own the mines, right? Or the majority of the mines, along with some other big countries. So they get all this high-grade, cheap uranium to fuel their fleet. And then the dirty little buggers are making plutonium mixed oxide fuel from the fuel. And La Hague, reprocessing site in France, has 500 security guards. 500 security guards. Simulating the unthinkable, model shows nuclear winter food production plunge. Simulating the unthinkable. So this was a study. I was zoomed right in on it because it was, a lot of the studies are very pitched in. I don't think I took the original screen capture, but it was from a journal. I think it was. Simulating the unthinkable, model shows nuclear winter food production plunge. So we already had a nuclear winter. We already had a nuclear war. We didn't have a nuclear winter. We had the biggest of the biggest of the biggest nuclear wars. We had a war so big that people forget that it happened for some reason. A single nuclear war was the Soviet Union's biggest bomb. It was equal to over 3,800, almost 4,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. Plutonium bombs going off at the one time, 4,000. And that was a single bomb. That's the same as a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout, does the same damage, has the same attributes as a nuclear war. There's no different. And back then, of course, the armies were separated from the cities. They weren't holding the communities as human hostages like they do now. A nuclear winter, by the way, is a theoretical concept, exactly. You already had, Castle Bravo in the Marshall Islands, Bikini Atolls. That was a nuclear war, just that single bomb. That was over 1,000, 1,200 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. The animosity equivalent, the exact same radioactive fallout. That's a nuclear winter. It would have lofted the same amount of debris into the atmosphere. And it went 45 miles up into the atmosphere. It blew out windows 700 kilometers away. Right? It was an incredible amount of debris thrown into the atmosphere. Well, quite surprising, no nuclear winter. The Americans and the French and the British, what they done with nuclear weapons is just unconscionable. The nuclear industry side of those countries. It's an industry, an industry that an entire legacy is predicated upon just perpetual social engineering, propaganda, deception, deceit, dishonesty, and cowardness. A nuclear winter is a theoretical concept But that concept, the original concept was a paper written by two people, right? And that got gobbled up by UN and then put out there in movies and in books and everything else, and referred to by pundits in the media as real. But there was no, right? Is to make the idea of doing stuff like that is to make the general population become so caught up in that they forget that we already had nuclear wars. That was your nuclear testing. That's what nuclear testing was. Instead of blowing up somebody else's country, you just blew up your own country. So have anybody here today in the last year wondered what would happen if Russia and America start throwing nuclear weapons at each other? You know, the radioactive fallout. I mean, you know, there was 900 tests outdoors or something. Like all the underground tests blew open the earth. Everything was ejected out of these holes in the ground, right? There had to be a pressure relief point. And so all of them, when you look at the footage, and they're all available, not all of them, but most of them are available on YouTube, that old footage of the nuclear explosions underground. Go watch them. You can see everything is vented. Not only that, all the rainwater forever will go down in that hole and become radioactive and end up in the water tables. It's a death machine. That's all nuclear has ever been. It's a concept. It's a theoretical concept. And it's not that theoretical because when you look at all the nuclear bombs we already set off, it's going to be worse than a nuclear war we're going to have, and yet we don't have a nuclear winter. We might have a perpetual nuclear summer, though, from all the releases. You destroyed the ecosystem of the entire planet. And that's why we're getting the planet is heating up. But if the climate scenario expected to follow a large-scale nuclear war in which smoke and soot from the firestorm blocks the sun, then it would be a nuclear winter. So unless we have a long winter, we can't say there's a nuclear winter, right? Unless we have a nuclear war, there's no nuclear winter. So don't worry about it. Nuclear doesn't cause that. It causes the earth to dry up and turn into dust eventually, and that's what we're seeing happening right now. Right? They want you to think the global temperatures would sharply drop and all the food would stop growing. Well, that's true in some ways, but it's because you killed all the pollinators. Hearing wraps up, Congress must act to advance nuclear energy. Why do we always see so many stories where the media comes out with this narrative for the, what do they call us again, civilians or something? Population. It's a really strange culture, isn't it? What are we doing here? It's the way it rolls sometimes for me. The Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, Regulatory Affairs held a hearing yesterday titled "The New Atomic Age, Advancing America's Energy Future." The Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policies, Regulatory Affairs, people that make shit happen, held a hearing yesterday titled "The New Atomic Age." I was wondering if they didn't use the word renaissance in it, though. Advancing America's Energy Future. So imagine if you took some of this energy, when I'm telling you this story, and put it into geothermal. There is no nuclear atomic age. There is no new atomic age. There is no advancing American energy's future. And they've had all the money they could ever use. They've had all the opportunities. Yeah, solar mirrored assisted heating. I love it. Call it nose. Crooks, they call it. Dana. Hi, everybody. During the hearing, members heard from witnesses, like James Hansen, Brock Wallace, Miles Allen, BP Oil. The event of small and micro modular nuclear reactors and how the development and deployment will advance the use of safe, clean, and reliable. Safe. They got to have that. That's always comes first, and then clean, and then reliable. That's always over and over and over everywhere you go. Safe, clean, reliable. Used to be too cheap to meter, too clean and green. Nuclear energy. So they have all this money, monetary, and they have all this prominence, all these academics, all these members, all these subcommittees, and hearings and everything else. And you give this industry whatever you want, 90% of it gets stolen right away. Whether you're building a reactor or trying to survey for one. Members emphasized, or cleaning up nuclear waste, they steal 90% through the administration. Members emphasized the importance of expanding nuclear energy because of its efficiency and low cost compared to other energy sources. Again, it's the most expensive source out there. Just getting the fuel is prohibitively expensive, my goodness. And they're still importing it from Russia, the majority of it. It's important to recognize that in the 70s, clean, safe nuclear, you got to use the word safe from the 70s. These reactors were all inherently safe and all had to be upgraded because they were unsafe. And it was very safe. It was safe nuclear power, and it was very safe. It was the safest form, so safe even, safe back, safe then. Safe became safe affordable, and safe quickly, safely grew to safely 20 safely percent. Safely America, safe electric, safe power, safety potential. Clean, safe nuclear power was very safe. It was safest. Safe nuclear power, very safe. Safest form of energy in history, even back then. Safe nuclear power, it was very safe, and it was safest form of energy in history, even back then. Whoever sat there and wrote that, can you imagine how twisted their minds actually are in real life? It was so safe, it was safe. It was like safe nuclear power. Safe. It was so safe, I thought it was safe. Safe nuclear power. I can almost see him now. Joshua Schmidt, Energy Policy Leader at the Abundance Institute. Jesus. Is that your real name, Mr. Schmidt? Stated in his open testimony, for decades, the American engineers built nuclear swiftly and cheaply and safely. Safely. It was so safely. Safe nuclear. Safe nuclear. Major barriers include as low as reasonably achievable. That's a major barrier, is it? Not poisoning everybody is a major barrier. I get that. And that nasty linear no threshold. Like all the animals died in all the experiments, so this is not some figment of people's imagination. As low as reasonably achievable, when the original charters that they ran on, there was nothing would get off site ever, under any circumstances. They were the safest form of energy, even back then. There is no radiation caused deaths associated with 3 Mile Island release. So in your face, Dana. Not so fast here, boogeyman. Cancer incidences among the residents. This paper downplayed it, but made a pretty interesting statement. An increased risk of leukemia was found among men exposed to higher external radiation doses, but women were not found to have an increased cancer risk among those exposed to higher external radiation doses. How do you only get exposed to external radiation doses from radioactive fallout? Anybody want to explain how that science actually works? How do you not breathe it in or drink it or consume it or absorb it or get it in your hair and clothing? How does that work? Anybody? That's the highlights, by the way. External. What an interesting thing to say, eh? external radiation. They got leukemia from external, not internal, Dana. It's crazy, man. They're not doing that for no reason. Like, first off, it's to suggest it's peer-reviewed is ludicrous, but it allegedly was. You'll love this one. Testing of evaporators began at 3 Mile Island. This is some of the whoppers they've told you about 3 Mile Island. They've got a lot of whoppers about 3 Mile Island. Here's some of the better ones. The release effect, and I can almost picture James Hansen saying this. Hang on, let me find James Hansen. I want you to hear the tone of voice before I read this. Good old James. He never lets us down. He's always good for it. He's always good. James Hansen. Bring it on home, baby. Here we go. There once was James Colbert, man, what a scumbag he turned out to be. Holy shit. He sold Fukushima updates to Fukushima Prefecture sadistic demons. Oh, there he is. So I just want you to hear this guy's voice for a second, and then I'll read that last one to you. Anytime you're ready, Jerry.
Nuclear energy is harder for people to understand, the idea of radiation. I mean, radiation is natural. The Earth is bombarded by radiation all the time. So the radiation that was released, for example, in 3 Mile Island, that exposed the accident at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, exposed residents nearby to radiation, which is equivalent to the amount of radiation that you get by flying in a commercial aircraft across the continent and
back. Which is a ludicrous, it's absurd to suggest it. So the release effects from 3 Mile Island on the average person living within 50 miles of 3 Mile Island will be less than the amount of radiation received from watching color television for a year. I mean, it's so insane to say anything like flying on an airplane. It's so far from the truth. It's absurd to even put it in a. But this is what they've been doing for 80 years now, the same lies. When you go to university, that's your first year students learn all that stuff right away. And they'll go home and practice on their friends and families. We less than the amount of radiation, like the radiation from watching the color TVs back in them days were definitely brutal. But to suggest that radiation that's in your body pulsing energy every second, your body's building a tumor around it for the rest of your life, is the same as receiving. It's a totally different type of radiation. I'm not saying TVs back then were very good for you. I am saying this is totally different stuff. And you can't conflate them. But you kind of got a good point, though. Color televisions back in the early days, it was evil, man. The tubes they were using and the energy that was coming out of those screens to get those colors, that was just evil what they done. I had watched some documentaries on it. It was the TV's frequencies were the same as a child's brain's frequency. So it was meant to lull the child into this utter hypnotic state and draw them right to the TV, right into the danger zone. They were like a moth to a light bulb. It would draw them right to the danger zone. And you could yell at them. And then the kids were brushing their teeth with fluoride toothpaste every morning. And they were supposed to brush their teeth after breakfast and head off to school. So as soon as they go in the bathroom and brush their teeth, because they put these big globs, because it's really sweet like candy, and they would eat some of it, they would get poisoned. And you can yell at them, they couldn't hear you if that TV was playing. They weren't ignoring you. They were kids, they weren't ignoring you. They were hypnotized.
nuclear energy is harder for people to understand, the idea of radiation. I mean, radiation is natural. The Earth is bound.
Disaster that wasn't. 2 million people around 3 Mile Island 2 during the meltdowns received only 1 milligram above the usual dose of radioactivity. So 2 million people were poisoned. That's what they're acknowledging. And it's not, you're not getting like energy from like a milligram or micro, which is 1,000 microsieverts. You're getting physical atoms in your body. Physical atoms in your body. So a milligram is 1,000 times 750 atoms minimum. So 750,000 atoms in their body, pulsing energy, destroying their immune system. And there's a lot of transient people in 3 Mile Island. Sinister, right? Cleanup on Unit 2 continued until 1993, 8 years later. And they were boiling water, over 2 million gallons of incredibly radioactive water, and they claimed only tritium. It was only tritiated. This was water from the cleanup. It was full of fuel particulates and everything else. It was nasty stuff. This was multiple sieverts a liter. They boiled that off. It took them about 2 years to boil it off, rather than store it for 1 million years. The industry, and no matter how you look at this industry, it screams evil. Industry and history. It screams it at you. Why are you so evil? Yeah. Why are you always so evil all the time for? $122. I'll give up now because it's pretty late down here. Normally my shows are over at 12 o'clock. I had a long day. I'm still trying to make progress. Looks like I'm going to go ahead for next week, and if it all works out. I'm learning as I'm going how they rent these places, right, to do a presentation. I'm pretty sure the industry is all over me about this. They don't want this taken off. And so I got a pretty, I suspect I'm in for a pretty rough ride over the next few months from this industry. But I'm good to go. I know the world needs to hear the story. We have to have a debate. We can't have it on YouTube for some reason. I got to have it somewhere else. So I'm committed to seeing it through. I like to do it every week, every Saturday. Which leaves me pretty vulnerable, but that's life. The planet needs somebody to have a conversation. So I think we're good to go. This was Cassandra Callender. She was forced to undergo chemo. She was forced to undergo chemo. They took her from her house, court-ordered chemotherapy for cancer because she was under 18. So she got to get radiation or chemo. She didn't want neither one of it. And they ended up, as far as I remember, using chemo radiation on her. So they used both, which is typical, right? They can't get you to take radiation, they'll kill you with the chemicals or chemo. Who was forced by Connecticut courts as a teenager. They took her from her family's home, under guard at the hospital, and pumped her full of chemicals, they call it chemo, until she was ready to die, then they sent her home to die. And she went home, curled up in the dog's bed, and that's where she spent her final few weeks. If you did it to your dog, you get arrested. It was so horrible. See, I watched her other friends die from it too, right? She's like, I don't want that to happen to me. And all the way across Canada, if your kid has cancer, they will take that kid and they will inject radiation into your kid and chemicals until the kid is ready to die. Because they love you so much. And Campbell, man, it's just, there's really something wrong with these people. You got all the migratory whales who were already emaciated last year when they headed south, 12,000 mile migration. 52% have died post-Fukushima. And the whales we're seeing, all the migratory whales are extremely emaciated. You can't have, this is the gray whales we're talking about, all the other whales are the same. I mean, look at this killer whale in Belgium a few weeks ago. Like, that's so emaciated, it's unbelievable. The peanut head, the shoulder blade sticking out, the spine. I already done a presentation on that a few weeks ago. You'll see it in the playlist. The die-offs. You can see all the other pictures. Holy crap, that. Same thing for New Zealand, too. They have bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae visible even from the shore. 12,000 mile migration to breeding and calving grounds off the coast of Mexico. That's the nursery. When they left the nursery, it was full of dead whales. Emaciated dead whales. So in about 2 years, because they were emaciated last year, no babies survived. There's only 80 babies this year. And they're emaciated. They're not finding any food. There is no food. And the food they're finding, they can't uptake it because they have leukemia. Because they have producing so many white blood cells from the bioaccumulation of isotopes, I guess. And which has been predicted, right? It was predicted for the killer whales, you would have 1,000 atoms per kilogram by 2016 or something, right? That's normal to see now of every species. Right, it's normal to see the severe emaciations. They actually starved to death, or they died because they couldn't uptake nutrition no more because they bioaccumulated so much radiation. And it's the same for all the species worldwide because 4 buildings broke down in Japan. Wrap your mind around that statement. 4 buildings broke down, and now we're all radioactive forever. Yeah, hi everybody. As Rig. I'm afraid that's what that is. Delusion is the solution, yeah. Thanks, Data. Night, everybody. Thanks for everybody. Have a great night. Apologies, I was late. If you make it this far, give us a thumbs up. It costs us very little. It goes a long way. Doesn't look like Mr. James got anything posted tonight. We'll go back to an old standby favorite. Kind of in the mood for nuclear Belgium, or atomic corruption, or the enrichment man. Dr. Sternglass, calm down, Charlie. Small modular reactor, hype train, rolling stewardship, blues. These are all classics, eh? Nuclear Belgium it is. Take care. Have a great night.
100 hands, reverse the law. Phase 1 set, now put on pause. They claimed the grid could not endure and fed the myth of power pure. The fuel was buried, not the plan. It only waits for votes to stand. From all they stacked the vessels deep. T-hands ran long though did not sleep. No chant was sung, no grave was raised. Just soft delights in western bays. A farmer passed through fields unclaimed. No one asked what was in his name. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots casted, elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. They wrote it down in 23, then turned the page before the plea. The cause they pitched became a door, a lease renewed without a floor. The mask was spun in policy, but no one asked the river's fee. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots casted, elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. Now tell the child in Malta today what steams beneath the concrete base. Dessel's drums into Milan, and NATO carries what we weigh. The wind from Flanders bends its back. The scaffold stands, but none look back. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots casted, elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast.